Okay, so I said this before. This was also said by others who had gone and talked to Ukrainians on the ground, that the likelihood of the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian people accepting a withdrawal from the entirety of the Donbass, including the unoccupied portions, meaning that they would withdraw as the Russians come in and take those positions. Not the Russians withdraw 20 meters back, the Ukrainians draw 20 meters back with their armies, and you have like a buffer zone of some sort. No, what the Russians are demanding, and there seems to be some desire amongst American leadership for, is for the Ukrainians to withdraw from Kramatorsk, from Slovyansk, from Konstantinivka, from Limon, from all of these locations that are not occupied or currently that there's Ukrainians struggling for them right now, and to give them up without a fight, to give up the defenses of the fortress belt, to give up the elevated position that gives them a more defensive advantage, in referencing the geography, to give up the homes of hundreds of thousands of people, who also have to experience the same fate of those who have lost their homes before. Not to mention, I mean, do we really want to see the Ukrainians have to file all those people into the backs of buses? Why is it that the pressure is on the Ukrainians to give up their homes, to give up more of their homes, and not for the Russians to freeze the front after the Ukrainians have already agreed to a general freezing of the front line? And that was the standard that Trump entered the office with. A general freezing of the front line or immense pressure would be brought on the Russians. Never happened. Okay. So I knew that this was in a position that they were going to move the Ukrainians off of with ease. And I thought it was unlikely that they were going to move them off of it. That from the Ukrainian perspective, they have no guarantee that the Russians are going to respect a ceasefire. They violated them before. And considering that they violated them so many times before, even violating them within the last year, as Trump has attempted to go into ceasefires like the energy ceasefire and the civilian infrastructure ceasefire, that the Russians never even admitted that they agreed to after the Trump administration said they agreed to it. Those ceasefires could say to a Ukrainian commander, okay, are we going to pull back from these positions and then have the war start again in 3 months? So Ukraine has once again been put under this pressure that they should accept a withdrawal from this territory because the American government wants a quick out. The Ukrainian government worried about the future of their country. During the latest U.S.-mediated negotiations in Geneva on February 17th to 18th, Kiev and Moscow discussed a joint Russian-Ukrainian civilian administration to run a demilitarized zone in the Donbass. But Ukrainian officials says the proposal is unrealistic and unacceptable, and the recent round of talks again ended in a stalemate. The plan follows the failure of other stillborn ideas discussed during the talks between Ukraine, Russia, and the U.S. The concept was first reported by the New York Times. The proposal envisions withdrawing both Russian and Ukrainian troops from parts of the Donbass and the country's east and establishing a civilian authority to manage the area. It would be potentially staffed by both Ukrainian and Russian representatives. This is a terrible idea. I don't know how you see the Ukrainians and Russians fight so fiercely like they have, to the point where like the Russians are spending like hours and hours of negotiation time to tell them they'll fight them like they fought Sweden for 21 fucking years or some shit. They're doing that. And you're saying, oh, you know what I think is a good idea? Let's have them both run the area. And then everybody wins. Now, I don't think that, no. Okay? Honestly, I don't practically think that's a good idea. I don't practically think that's a good idea. And it seems like something that's rife for interference. Rife for interference. The proposal envisions withdrawing both Russian and Ukrainian troops from part of the Donbass, establishing a civilian authority to manage the area. It would potentially be staffed by both Russian and Ukrainian representatives. The Kiev Independent has learned from a person familiar with the discussions that U.S. negotiators introduced the idea during recent talks as part of efforts to resolve the territorial dispute. The status of the Donbass remains the most contentious issue between Kiev and Moscow. Ukraine maintains the freezing of current frontline position offers the most realistic basis for a ceasefire, which was also Trump's position before he ran away. Russia continues to demand, that's my editorialization, that wasn't in there. Russia continues to demand that Ukrainian forces withdraw from the region as a precondition to any agreement, a demand that Kiev has repeatedly rejected. Ukrainian officials say to even consider a demilitarized zone in the Donetsk Oblast is difficult to imagine, let alone a joint civilian administration involving Russia. Alexander Meskonov, head of the Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee, said this would still effectively require Ukrainian troops to withdraw from fortified positions that they've spent a long time building. That's the core of the problem. For us, this is unacceptable. We cannot leave these fortified districts of the Donetsk Oblast and essentially hand them over. Rosenko added that he does not believe that the project is workable and warned against drawing comparisons to historical precedents. I understand that the Americans think in the term of historical analogies, like the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. But the lawmaker said that doesn't fucking work because the DMZ is literally like a fucking 30-foot strip. What this would be is like, this would cover the homes of potentially hundreds of thousands of fucking people. That's not the same thing. But the lawmaker noted that the buffer zone in the Crimea Peninsula is far shorter. Okay, yeah, far shorter than the current front line. The idea of establishing a demilitarized zone in the Donbass was initially included in the U.S. proposal of the 28-point peace plan. Under that proposal, Kiev would have withdrew its troops from parts of the Donetsk Oblast that it still controls. Russian President aide Yuri Yushchanov previously said that Moscow could agree to such an arrangement if Russian police or National Guards were granted the right to patrol the demilitarized zone. Oh my fucking God. Oh my fucking... Sure, we would be okay with the demilitarized zone if we can put our army in it. Yeah, genius. Fucking genius. Great job. Great job. We've gotten the great compromise. We replaced the Russian army with the Russian army. You've really moved the Russian position, Donald Trump. We've really gotten them close. We've made great success in negotiations. We've made great success. 400 days. And right now, and we've gotten the Russians to agree, fine, you know what? We'll replace the Russian army in Ukraine with the Russian army. Fucking fantastic. Great job. Everybody, margaritas all around. The political logic behind such ideas appears designed to meet the Kremlin's demand for Ukrainian withdrawal. We're presenting it under different terminology. They are trying to disguise the withdrawal. This reinforces something I've said it again and again and again. Listen to Donald Trump talk about the conditions being placed upon Ukraine. Listen to him talk about Ukraine. He says, Ukraine's got to come to the table. Ukraine's got to make a deal. He never describes what the deal is. He never describes what's put on the table. He just describes that there is a table and that there is a deal upon it. But he'll never go into the details on it. He'll never go into the details of the tens of thousands of people that would be forced from their home. He doesn't go, or the tens of thousands of families that would be forced from their home. He doesn't go into the details of all the land that would be given up, the defensive positions that would be given up, the rewarding this would be doing for the Russian state and its manner of aggression. The fact that this would place a lot of trust in the Russian army to not just use these new jumping off points to dig deeper into the country, as the Russian army is right now trying to dig towards the city of Zaporizhia. And under the Russian constitution, they've still technically annexed under their laws. I mean, you're really asking for a lot from the Ukrainians here. And what do the Ukrainians get in response? Do they get long-term security guarantees that hold? Maybe, maybe not. You got to remember with what administration that they're dealing with. It's not like there's another American administration to deal with. There's only the one. There's only the one. So you get only the vaguest of promises in return for putting your neck out and trusting only the most untrustworthy partner. It's not that surprising that the deal isn't being swallowed easily. Yaroslav, a lawmaker from the opposition Holos party, that it is premature to expect that a joint governance scenario would be implemented. He added that countering such a scenario requires strengthening Ukraine. He noted that Kiev has already seen numerous proposals that ultimately failed to materialize, citing ideas such as reintegrating with elements of autonomy, a freeze of the current status quo, and a demilitarized zone with foreign peacekeeping. Europe, and that one makes the most sense. I mean, that was one that they floated around for a while and they just come through the side. I mean, Trump is more letting the Russians shop around than he is employing tools to enforce standards like he threatened to do on the campaign trail. Europe and the so-called Coalition of the Willing have promoted deploying peacekeeping troops to monitor a potential ceasefire. President Volodymyr Zelensky has argued that such a presence could help deter another Russian invasion, because obviously that could mean not only war with Ukraine, but war with other states, deterring a potential aggressor, because maybe they are fine with fighting the Ukrainians, but are they fine with fighting the Ukrainians, the French, the Germans, the Italians, the Swedes, all of them? Probably not. It's part of the reason why the Russians reject it, because it could close off their opportunities to invade again. U.S. President Donald Trump previously spoke positively about European peacekeepers in Ukraine and suggested that Russia might agree to them. However, U.S. officials have recently expressed skepticism about the feasibility of such arrangements. Why? Because the Russians don't want it. Why don't they want it? Because it would stop them from invading again. The exact purpose of the peacekeepers. We are managed by only the most brilliant of negotiators. We're managed by only the most brilliant of diplomats. Moscow has repeatedly rejected the proposal, saying it would not accept NATO troops on Ukrainian soil. In Yaroslav's view, the greatest danger lies in the proposal's lack of viability, as Russia continues to seek control over all of the Donetsk Oblast. Zelensky has also addressed the concept publicly. Speaking to reporters on February 6, he said Ukraine would not relinquish sovereignty under any new framework. This is our land. So this means not only just he won't give up unoccupied territory, he's not going to sign anything that says any of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory is part of the Russian Federation. These concerns resurfaced. Oh, this is our land. We do not recognize it as Russian, even if it is a free economic zone. Our land, if it is a free economic zone, is our people, our flag, and our control. Those concerns resurfaced during the latest rounds of talks on February 17th to 18th, when negotiators again failed to reach a breakthrough on territorial issues. We haven't found constructive solutions on territorial issues, Zelensky on February 20th. At the same time, he noted a point of agreement. All sides have accepted that the United States would take the lead in overseeing any potential ceasefire. If there is a ceasefire, then the Americans will be primarily responsible for monitoring it. I consider this a very important result. Now, this is interesting because if U.S. will be primarily responsible for monitoring ceasefire. If they're primarily responsible, then you have to imagine, is this red line Donnie we're going to be dealing with when it comes to responding to a ceasefire? Because if the Russians break a ceasefire, are we going to treat it like how it's being treated in Gaza if a ceasefire gets broken? Where it gets broken, we just act in horror and then nothing happens. Because if the Russians bomb somebody, a bunch of people die, and the United States says, oh, that's very naughty, but we have to respond within 72 hours. And after 24 hours, it seems the bombing has stopped. And then after a while, Russia probes and they bomb maybe for 48 hours before stopping. And they probe a little bit here and probe a little bit there. I mean, they saw their drones go over the Polish border. They saw their drones go over the Romanian border. They saw their jets go over Polish oil rigs. They saw their drones fly over Danish airports. They saw their arson attacks tear through Europe. They saw their bombing attacks tear through European manufacturing. They saw their planned assassinations get foiled, but that doesn't mean they can't try another one. So if the red line gets crossed with red line Donnie, I mean, we also saw what happened in Iran.
The only way I see Donald Trump getting to where he is calls for him to have been positioned by someone completely unknown. Note, not promoted. His business affairs have always been questionable. This fits the Krasnov model.
I don't really believe in the Krasnov model. I understand why people suspect the Krasnov model. I'm not very sympathetic to many conspiracy theories, but I'm sympathetic to this one because if you were to be somebody trying to sabotage the Ukrainians while getting away with doing it, trying to sabotage the Ukrainians, undermine them, while giving yourself enough plausible deniability to make it not look like you're literally just trying to slit the throat of the nation and hand the corpse over to the Russians, it would be in the way that he is doing it. Whether that is done purposefully or that is done just through President Trump's sheer incompetence, I don't know how much it matters in the end if we get to the same station. I'm more of an outcomes-based man.